IVM.
Thank you for listening to this week's Edges and Sledges cricket podcast. This week's show is sponsored by Storytel, and we're recommending an ebook or audiobook from their catalogue every week. This week's book is Sanjay Manjrekar's Imperfect. It's an autobiography, and it tells the story of our very own Sanju Manju as a cricketer, son, father, and commentator, all in his own words. I can honestly say it's one of the best cricketing autobiographies I have ever read. It's very refreshing. The honesty with which he writes is almost brutal at times. But you guys should definitely check it out. You can get it for free at storytel.com/IVM, where they're offering a 30-day free trial instead of the usual 14-day trial. That's storytel.com/IVM. And now, enjoy this week's show, guys. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. It's been a fun week in the world of cricket. The world's number one T20 team, Pakistan, has been thrashed 3-0 by a second-string Sri Lanka team. And Mitchel Marsh has broken his hand by hitting a dressing room wall. But we're an Indian cricket podcast, so we're going to focus on the ongoing test series against South Africa. My name is DJ, and I've got one of my co-hosts, Ashwin Garg, with me this week. Due to unforeseen circumstances, which is basically Kohli enforcing the follow-on, Varun is currently on a flight back to Singapore as we record this. So Ashwin, how are you doing this week, man?
I'm good. I think in hindsight, we probably should have predicted that there would be at least one 4-day test. So bad on us for not scheduling accordingly. But yes, I think it would have been nice for all three of us to chat this. But who thought it would be done by day 4?
Absolutely. So there's lots to talk this week, right? So let's start straight from the top. India were leading first, after winning the first test, they were leading 1-0 at Vishakhapatnam. We come to Pune, and obviously there's a history with the Pune pitch. The last time India played a test match here, we actually lost the test match to Australia. So what were your thoughts on this pitch, Ashwin, firstly?
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, way, way better, right? Definitely good to see a pitch that got us at least to 4 days, where there were some good runs. Some of the quick bowlers were extracting some bounce and swing out of it, but also you got some good spin. So finally felt like Pune had created a pitch worthy of a test match. I think it's a different story about the ground in general, but the pitch, I think, stood up to the test.
Yeah, and the last time we played here, we lost by 333 runs to Australia. Steve O'Keefe took a bunch of wickets. Kohli left a straight one, and there were all sorts of questions being asked, not only of the pitch, but of the curator, who actually got into some amount of trouble, if we've been reading the press correctly. It's I think he's an ex-fast bowler, Mr. Salgaonkar, who got into trouble with some anti-corruption officials. He was eventually cleared of that point. But the pitch was definitely in focus. And in spite of its history, Pune produced a bouncy track instead of a spinning wicket. So obviously that led to some interesting changes for the team. Ashwin, let's talk through the change to the Indian team, which I found very interesting. Vihari actually got dropped and Umesh Yadav, a bowler out and out, came in instead of him. Now, was Vihari a little bit a success of his own, a victim of his own success in some ways? Success of his own victim?
I'm not sure how to answer that last question. I think it is interesting that Vihari got dropped despite having a really stellar run in the last, call it year even, or I don't know how long ago he made his debut, but an outstanding run. I mean, he's batted 12 times and he averages over 40. His last few innings, okay, he didn't do great in the one time he got to bat in the first, so he made only 10 runs. But again, he came in a situation where he just had to hit. But prior to that, he hit a century and a half century in the last test he played in the West Indies. And so it certainly wasn't Vihari being dropped for lack of performance or lack of proving himself. So then you come to the question, okay, what is the ideal composition for this side? And we talked it in depth. We'll continue to talk it. But yes, in a world where you want to play 5 out-and-out bowlers and you're going to play a keeper and your numbers 3, 4, and 5 are locked, there's no room for Vihari in this side. So really disappointing. I get the decision, to be honest. I think in India, you'd risk being in a situation where you have to bowl for a day and a half or 2 days straight. In that situation, having 5 out-and-out bowlers makes sense. And they rely on Ashwin and Jadeja to bat more than maybe other teams rely on their numbers 7 and 8. So all that to say, decision doesn't surprise me. I'm incredibly disappointed for Hanuma Vihari. He's a really, really great talent, and I want to see him play Test cricket for India for a long time, but it's going to be tough with the composition math.
And what I mentioned was him being a victim of his own success. He's done so well at number 6 that he wasn't even considered in some ways to open the batting, which he's done previously. Also because of Rohit's form at the top, right? He scored 200s in the previous Test match opening the batting. So Vihari got slotted in as number 6. And when we play 5 bowlers, Vihari actually just had to go out. So that's the way the cookie crumbles in some ways. So unfortunate for him. But South Africa as well dropped a spinner and played a fast bowler. So both teams clearly saw that, thought that pace was probably the way to go. Let's talk about the match itself, having dealt with the selection issues. Mayank Agarwal once again scored 100. He got a few edges at the start of the innings. Again, opening batsman, the ball was moving around a bit. Rabada and Philander bowled some nice opening spells. There was plenty of carry in the pitch. And he rode his luck a little bit. He hit the ball once into short legs, mid-riff almost. And there was one LBW, I think, which had 2 umpires' calls go his way. So all that apart, he batted really, really nicely. He got hit on the head and hit 3 boundaries immediately straight after that. So you saw his temperament was kind of unshakable. Went from, I think, 87 to 99 with 2 sixes and then scored 108, batting really, really nicely. Looked very disappointed to get out for 108. So, Ashwin, your thoughts on Mayank? And I mean, what a player he's turning out to be for India, right? 2 Test matches in home and 200s.
Yeah, and I mean, he's done well abroad too. He's done well in previous home tests as well. So nothing really to add to what you said. Outstanding cricketer. Feels like exactly what you said, right? Even 108, he wasn't satisfied. He wants to go on and make even more. He wants to go on and continue to make those big double century type knocks. And so really, really happy for him. Again, similar to Vihari, I hope he sticks around for a long time, but I think we found somebody we can be really proud of at the top of the order. So kudos to him. I think he stepped up. It's honest. I know we're going to talk about Kohli next, but disappointing in a match where you make a century to not be part of the headlines because of all the other great performances, but he'll be happy to have contributed to the team's series win.
Yeah, and absolutely agree. I mean, I thought he was quite unlucky to miss out on the man of the match performance for the first Test match as well, getting 215 in just his first Test match in India, which I thought was just an incredible performance anyway.
I mean, it's interesting. We've seen through the 90s and the early 2000s and stuff. I mean, I name drop Rahul Dravid, but I remember so many instances of him making a century or making a brilliant 50 or doing well, but playing second fiddle to somebody. And it's fine, right? In the grand scheme of things, his number one priority is getting his team over the line. But it's really interesting to start to see these players who are there, who are not super loud, not very vocal, don't hit the big sixes, but they're constantly contributing to the team's cause. And so Dravid comes to me. Obviously, we talk about the Lakshman 281 test, but people often overlook the fact that Dravid stayed with him as long as he did, made a great century. And so, anyway, it's just interesting to think about that parallel for Mayank.
Yeah, there's a couple of other instances that I can remember of Dravid. One being the Taunton Fest with Ganguly and again Sri Lanka in the 99 World Cup, and one being a one-day international with Sachin at New Zealand at Hyderabad versus New Zealand. So, yeah, I mean, Dravid, I think, was quite content to play second fiddle. I wouldn't actually say Mayank played second fiddle because he was quite attacking and he batted really, really, really nicely. But as you say, he was overshadowed in some ways. And so the parallel to Dravid is probably a fair one to make. The person who overshadowed him at Vizag was Rohit, who kind of fell to the moving ball in the first innings. I don't think he did very much wrong, to be honest. It was a good ball and he got an edge, and I think he was unlucky. I don't know whether you had anything to add to that, Ashwin, about Rohit's dismissal in the first innings or the only innings of this test.
Yeah, no, I said this after the first match, is that he is going to fail, and that's fine, right? Like there's no or very few batsmen who make runs every single time they go out to bat. I mean, even Kohli and Smith fail at one point. Smith, by the way, got dismissed for a duck in a domestic match in the Sheffield Shield, but that's a discussion for later maybe. But anyway, the best of the best failed. Rohit is going to fail. I think the key is, can he continue to perform 2 out of every 3 out of every 4 innings he bats?
Absolutely, and I think a hat tip to Ben Rajadurai who wrote in with that. I think it was an American who actually dismissed him for a duck, which was pretty funny.
It was. I thought it was great that most of the internet and social media were saying England is frantically Googling to see if he has any British ancestry, if you can bring this guy over to play for England, because nobody else in the English side seemed to be able to get Smith out.
Absolutely. But just sticking with Rohit for a second, there was a very interesting article by Ian Chappell about him. And he said that opening with Rohit is a really good move, not only because of the reason we've actually given previously, which is his mindset is clear, he's got 0 for 0, no pressure on him. But Chappell actually feels that if he batted below Kohli, he would feel a bit overawed by Kohli. He'd already been in and probably on 100 or 150 by the time Rohit came into bat if India were doing well. Or Kohli was already set in some way. So Chappell actually feels it's good for Rohit to give him time to settle down and then allow Kohli to come in later. So kind of let Rohit find his feet in an innings. Is there any logic to that, Ashwin? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The first thing I'll say is it's obviously really smart to come out after the guy's made a double and a century and then say, oh, this is why it's a good idea to open with Rohit. Of course, it now looks like a good idea. You should give credit to the people who've been saying it since before the Indian management chose to try.
Which is us, right?
And others. There were others too. But we were definitely one of them. But it's super easy to come out after his first successful test as an opener and say, oh, it's a good idea, and here's why, and retrofit an explanation. That said, I don't fully disagree with the explanation. I think as a top-class, world-class cricketer, you should probably have the maturity and the decency to figure out how to perform in any situation. But I do understand the pressure that comes from another batsman being at the other end with lots more runs. And I don't know if there are too many successful examples of people who open in two formats of the game playing really well lower down. I mean, you have openers who bat at 3 or 4, but generally an opener batting at 5 or 6, I can't think of good examples of successful openers, limited overs openers who've done that. So I think it does make sense.
Right. Interesting take there by Ian Chappell. We'll put a link in the show notes to the Chappell article, which is an ESPN Cricket Info article. But the man that Chappell thinks that Rohit feels overshadowed by, I mean, Virat Kohli, 254 not out. Dropped on 3, remember, by Maharaj. It was a return catch, which Maharaj could have probably taken. There were a few edges that flew past slip. He was caught off a no ball when he was at 208. I mean, it wasn't a chanceless innings, but my God, I mean, 254 is just a mammoth score. And what I want to ask you, Ashwin, is that I know we talk about all these other cricketers and we always say that, yeah, Kohli's done it again. And there's an article on ESPN Cricket Info where the writer says that he does everything else while Kohli's batting because Kohli just keeps batting. But do we just take Kohli's runs for granted now? I mean, is it just so par for the course that we're no longer as excited as we should be about it? Because we'll realize when they dry up and we'll realize very, very quickly.
Don't say when they dry up, say if, because we hope they never dry up. But I think it's an interesting question. I think that's the nature of being as consistent as you are, is it's only really surprising when you fail. And at this point, you've just gotten used to him performing well. That said, I mean, a double century, and this was his highest ever score, by the way. You have to give credit to that. You have to appreciate the beauty of the knock that he played. Fun fact, he now is the most ever double centuries for an Indian, overtaking Sehwag and Sachin, who were both tied at 6. He was at 6, obviously, before tied, but now he's out and out, got the most. And he's 4th on the list of most double centuries ever. DJ, do you know who the top 3 are? If you looked this up, then that's cheating.
No, it's going to be Bradman. He's got 12. I think there's Sangakkara's got like 11, which is insane. And then there's, I want to say Lara.
Nicely done.
Maybe.
Yes, Lara rounds it out with 9.
Yeah.
So pretty incredible company to be in.
Awesome.
For what it's worth, I mean, Bradman was the exception to all these stats, but Kohli's played 81 matches. Lara and Sangakkara had each played over 130. So he's got a long way to potentially catch these guys. I really hope he does.
Absolutely. And he went past Don Bradman as well. He went past the 6,996 runs as well, right, in this test match. So, Kohli's got to 7,000 runs past the Don Stally in a few more innings. But anyway, Ashwin, I'm going to ask you very quickly. In test cricket, is it Kohli or is it Smith that is the number 1 batsman in test cricket at the moment?
Big question. My heart says Kohli, my head still says Smith. Honestly, there's going to be nothing better than watching them face off against each other. I mean, the last time India toured Australia earlier this calendar year, Smith wasn't playing because of his ban. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out when they play Australia in test matches next, because Australia is visiting India, I think, in January to play some ODIs. but I don't know when they're playing test matches next. So short answer, both of them. Heart says Kohli, head says Smith.
And I think it's an impossible question to answer, and we'll only be able to answer statistically at the end of each of their respective careers. So I think, again, we just...
Thanks, man. You asked me, put me on the spot, and then you didn't give an answer yourself.
That's absolutely the way it goes. That's what the privilege of hosting this show is.
All right. You just wait. Next week, I'll be back to hosting.
Absolutely. Okay. He scored 250, but I found it quite weird that we saw all these blue empty seats in the stands, man. I mean, what's going on with Test cricket in India? It was played at Vizag and now it's been played in Pune. There's a great thread by the Fourth Seat podcast, actually, one of the other podcasts that cover aspects of Indian cricket. And that talks about why India or the BCCI actually can't designate big city stadiums as the test stadiums because, and he goes on to elaborate that he's not being elitist and all of that stuff, but it's just that the crowds don't come in these smaller cities or where the stadiums are too far away from the city, because this stadium particularly was 20 kilometers from the city, right? So while you had the diehards like the North Stand gang that had driven around from Bombay full of doctors and lawyers and other professionals who'd actually taken days off and gone to cheer Team India, the stands were completely empty. And I mean, it was a bit disappointing for me. I don't know what you felt about those pictures.
Yeah, incredibly disappointing, to be honest. And now, as you think about Pune in particular, there are a lot of folks who are very critical. It's obviously has a bad history with the pitch. We talked about the pitch already, but the ground itself is over an hour away from the city center. There's no easy public transit to get there. So you've almost set yourself up in a way that it makes it very difficult for the average fan to go out and watch the match. And again, for Kohli to make his highest score, and just to drop another stat, India to register their largest margin of victory ever against South Africa in front of very meager crowds is incredibly disappointing. So we've talked about how in the West Indies and in some parts of Australia, etc., you don't always fill up grounds. We've just come off the Ashes where we've seen packed stadiums. It's really disappointing that India is picking grounds where they're not able to fill it up because it is not a nationwide trend. And I think it's disappointing that they picked Pune to play such a big test match.
Absolutely. So we'll see whether there's an element of state politics and state association politics, obviously, in this, and games that get allocated to grounds which aren't full. And it's just disappointing to see. And hopefully the BCCI can look into it and give the marquee test matches to stadiums like, I don't know, Calcutta or Delhi or Bombay or Chennai. Man, I can't even remember the last time we saw a Chennai test match, which, I mean, Chennai is such an iconic stadium. We've seen so many great test matches in Chennai. The Pakistan test match comes to mind. The test match where India won the Border Gavaskar Trophy in 2001 comes to mind, with Harbhajan hitting it past the point fielder. There was, I mean, I think it's just sad. There was also that chase, of course, of 300 odd with Sachin and Yuvraj at the end, just after the Bombay attacks in 2008. So I think this needs serious looking into. Test cricket needs to be played in front of big crowds. And the country I live in, the UK, has got huge crowds for Test cricket. Lords is impossible to get tickets to. The Oval is always sold out. So India needs to look into this quite seriously.
And since you mentioned Chennai, can you, of the three of us on this show, have the best memory? You're always dropping data and stats and memories from matches gone past. Can you remember without looking when the last match was played in Chennai?
Was it a Dhoni double 100?
It was not a Dhoni double 100. Dhoni was not playing at the time.
Oh no, I genuinely can't, because didn't Dhoni get a double 100 against Australia? Was that in Chennai?
There was a very, very high individual score. So think back through that one. Who's made the highest individual?
Karun Nair, he made 303, no doubt. Yeah, he got that.
Well said. Yeah, KL Rahul made 199. So, I mean, I don't know if that plays a part, but that was in 2016. So almost 3 years ago. It'll be more than 3 years. But India made 759 for 7 in that match and won by an innings. So with Jadeja taking 7 wickets against England. So maybe that's part of why they're not getting the matches. But anyway, for what it's worth, I didn't remember that. I looked that up. But hey, it's still good to be able to stump you.
No, fair enough. But I mean, even then, it's been 3 years since one of the major test centers has got a test match. I find that incredible, man. I didn't even know that. As I said, I couldn't even remember when the last one was played there. Anyway, moving on. There were 50s from Pujara and Rahane, which deserve a mention. Jadeja got 91, which against what can only really be described as declaration bowling. So sometimes when we play cricket and the other team has got so many runs, you bring on a bowler who's just going to quicken the declaration from the other team. So Markram came on, Jadeja just feasted on him, got to 91, unlucky to miss out on his 100. But as soon as he got out, India declared for 601 for 5. And with that, guys, we're going to take a short break and we're going to come back and discuss the other 2 innings of the South African team, because there were only 3 innings in the test match. Stay with us and we'll see you after this break. Welcome back from that break, guys. And we're here now to discuss the South African first and second innings.
DJ, before you get into the innings, can I interrupt you for a second?
No, go on.
Do you think it was the right call to declare with the captain and the best batsman on the side batting and 254?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we'd got 601, right? I mean,
so this is the same captain who allowed Karun Nair in the match we just discussed to bat on to hit his triple century. Kohli has never made a triple century. 254 was his highest score. I guess I wonder if there was a different skipper. It was day 3 of the match. Day 2 actually still, sorry. Day 2 of the match. You had a long time to go. You had gotten this team dismissed twice in the first test match. There's a part of me that thinks under Dhoni or under a different skipper, they would have said, hey, go bat for 8 more overs. Just hit the ball out of the park. And because 300, I mean, Sehwag's done it, Nair's done it, etc. But there have only been 30-odd 300-plus scores in the history of Test cricket. So it's just, we were talking earlier about Kohli hitting lots of runs. I don't want to derail you starting to talk about the second innings, but there's a part of me that just believes under a different skipper, he would have gotten another few overs to try to go for that milestone. Obviously, as skipper himself, he had to make that call, and I'm honestly a little disappointed. I would have loved to see Kohli go for the triple.
So I think he mentioned this after the game as well. He said that you go out there to bat for 5 sessions. It's not about personal milestones. It's just about playing for the team. So he was making the right noises, but I think you're probably right. If he was a bit younger, I think he's past his 30s, so he's quite well settled, and he's not chasing personal milestones as much now. I'm sure he's driven by them, as most of us are. At some level or the other. But I think if he was younger, he might have thought about it. I think if there was another person in the captaincy role, they would have probably allowed him to go on and get it. But as captain, I don't think he could have justified it any further, to be honest. I mean, it's almost like, I don't know, when the CEO gives himself a bonus, right? This is turning into a corporate tips by Varun type of conversation.
There doesn't seem to be any shortage of CEOs giving themselves bonuses, by the way, in the world we live in. But anyway, I don't want to belabor it. I do agree. I think it's just interesting. Like, he didn't declare as soon as we crossed 600. He was waiting just for Jadeja to get his second test century. And as soon as he got out, he declared, right? So from my standpoint, it almost feels like you're at a little bit of a disadvantage. He says it before. He really does live by the words that it's not about personal milestones, but it just feels like you're 46 runs away from potentially a once-in-a-career thing. I hope it's not. I hope he goes on to make a triple someday, but sad to see him miss out.
Do you know what score they went into tea at? How many Kohli had got when he went into tea on day 2? I
don't know how much he had.
He was on 194 not out. Does that ring a bell?
From a test match standpoint, or are you talking about Syed Anwar?
Yeah, it's when it's when Dravid declared Sachin on 194 not out.
Of course, I remember that now. So declaration timing is obviously a controversial one with India and Indian captains.
Clearly. So I think Kohli did well. I mean, I think once Jadeja got out, it was a selfless gesture. I mean, but there's no end to that game. He could have gone on. The way he was batting, he could have got 400 and he would have broken Lara's record, and South Africa would have just been ground into the dust, poor guys.
I mean, from my perspective, the match ended with a full day and half a session left, right? So in hindsight, there was definitely enough time for him to keep batting on. Obviously, it was the right call at the time.
Absolutely agree. But anyway, we got to see it 601 for 5. And then, as the South Africans do, they came out and lost 3 wickets before the end of day's play. They nearly lost a 4th. There was a review for the night watchman and he was given not out. And then they came back the next day and wickets just continued to tumble. It was like, I thought it was just class bowling from India, using the pitch, using both turn and bounce to their advantage. I think the fast bowlers were bowling fantastically. Umesh, in particular, who I know you're a big fan of, bowled really well. So South Africa were like 162 for 8 when Faf du Plessis, who was showing some resistance, got out. There was a great umpiring decision by Nigel Long, actually, on Muthuswamy when he left one and Jadeja kind of half appealed and then celebrated after he was given the wicket by Nigel Long. And Muthuswamy then reviewed and it was upheld on the review. So, Ashwin, I thought that was a really nice moment where the umpires were actually validated. We criticize them so much, like during the Ashes, but I think it's important to mention when they do a good job.
Yeah, did you watch that ball, by the way?
Yeah.
To the naked eye, and Jadeja said this after himself, there was no way in the hell it looked out. Like, it didn't look even close to out. It was spinning so much. I guess we're not used to seeing the no shot offered, right? So for me, I think you're always judging, did it hit in line? When there's no shot offered for the LBW, it doesn't have to hit in line. But there was no way it looked out to me. Jadeja kind of half appealed. And he gave it out really quickly, not really quickly. He took his time, but he gave it out despite not getting a loud appeal. And I 100% agree. We give the umpires a lot of grief. We've got to give them full credit when they come up with the right decision.
And I think the best part is that Jadeja always thinks it's out. And even he...
Yeah, exactly. So does Saha, by the way. Saha is so all convinced all the time, whether there's an edge or not, whether it's LBW or not. He's always up and appealing loudly. And in this case, neither seemed convinced.
Saha actually did fairly decently because there was that edge by Bavuma, right, which they went up for. And Saha was convinced I was out, and that was proved, right? But we'll come to Saha. Don't worry. There's he's on my agenda items as usual.
It wouldn't be the Rishabh Pant show if we didn't talk about wicketkeeping.
Oh yeah, the Rishabh Pant is in there as well, of course. I mean, how can we do a show without Rishabh Pant? And we'll mention Dhoni as well. Why not? Or have we already?
We already have. You already technically brought him up, right? When you asked about him.
I was just thinking of the time he took apart Nathan Lyon and we won 4-0, which incidentally was the start of this 11 series consecutive home wins, by the way.
Yeah, well said. And again, just to reiterate that fact, this is a new world record. 11 consecutive home series wins by India after winning the second test match against South Africa. So really, really cool. Let's hope we can keep it going.
Starting under MS with his double 100 against Australia. Taking apart Nathan Lyon. What a memory that is. Anyway, moving on. After 162 for 8, Philander and Maharaj come in. Maharaj has got an injured shoulder, which he dived and tried to save a single from Kohli. And he's got an injured shoulder and he's not looking that comfortable. They put on more than 100. Ashwin, do we just run out of ideas with the tail? What happens to us? We've seen it in the West Indies. We saw it in the first test. We've seen it in both these innings here. What happens with the tail? What do we lose interest? What is it?
We've seen it before the West Indies too, right? Against Australia, against England in the past year. There have been many occasions where you get through the top 6, top 7, feel really good about yourself, and suddenly it goes south. So I'm not sure, honestly, what it is. I think it's probably an element of bringing your 100% intensity. And if you look at a Shami, for example, he was bowling with such incredibly high intensity early on and to the top order. And by the time he was bowling to Maharaj and Philander, I guess he thought, it's probably going to be relatively easier to get the wicket. So maybe it's a bit of that. Maybe it's a little bit of nothing to lose. I think from Maharaj and Philander, this was Maharaj's highest ever score. So really truly nothing to lose. So they just went after it. So I hope we can address that. Again, I would much rather be in this situation where we say we can get through a country's top 5 relatively quickly and then we struggle against the tail. I would never want to be in the opposite position.
So it seems like the last 2 wickets are the hardest for us to get. And you know who we were missing in that was the guy you mentioned at the start of the series, Bumrah. We didn't have this happen when Bumrah was playing, right?
We sort of did, right? I guess I'm trying to remember which match, but yes, you're right. I think in general, he's the guy to just bowl wicket to wicket. And there's the beauty of him being kind of a T20 bowler, right? Who bowls against a variety of different caliber of batsmen. But yeah, just bowl wicket to wicket, hit them at the toes and you'll get him bowled. Yeah,
and he's super quick. He's got a great bouncer. And basically, tailenders wouldn't want to be facing him, right? So I think that's where we missed Bumrah a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, is there a fitness issue with the bowlers? Do they get tired when they get towards the end of the innings? I don't know. We bowled like 105 overs in the first innings.
Yeah, but I mean, the flip side to that is they came out to bowl again the next day and bowled brilliantly. So who knows? Maybe it's a little bit of everything.
And maybe it is. Maybe we're already thinking ahead to the next innings, which eventually came around. It was 275 that South Africa were eventually dismissed for. Rohit Sharma taking a brilliant catch at leg slip, which I thought Sharma caught particularly well this innings and this test match, and I think he's a good addition in that slip cordon. And then the big question was, because 275 was the score in the first innings by South Africa, they were behind by 326 runs. Now, the question on everyone's mind, and we put out a poll immediately after the innings and the day ended at 275, saying, should India enforce the follow-on first thing next day? Nobody knew the answer to that. There was some chat about whether they should have to enforce the follow-on the first hour, an hour after the day's play, and tell the other team so that they know what they're going to be doing in the morning. I personally did not think India is going to be enforcing the follow-on because of what we've seen previously. There's a lot of data doing the rounds which says there isn't that much advantage in enforcing the follow-on. And it wasn't like 400 runs. It was 326. So, Ashwin, what did you make of India's decision to enforce the on day 4, being 326 runs ahead? Did it come a little bit out of the blue to you as it did to me?
Yeah, great question. I think a couple of things to address. The first is, you mentioned the Twitter poll that we put out there. The simple question was, should India enforce the follow-on first thing on Sunday? Yes or no? And we got a lot of responses, and it was 51% yes, 49% no. So to me, that just serves to show you exactly how divisive a question the follow-on is, right? Most of our polls tend to be one-sided. This was right down the middle. I think the second thing is, like you said, we are not expecting follow-ons. There have been many, many, many instances where India's gotten a lead greater than 200, and Kohli's choice is not to follow on, basically to give his bowlers some rest. So part 3 of what I was going to say is, I think there's a little bit of mental games here, and it comes to the question that lots of people are discussing is, at the end of a day's play, when South Africa is all out with a deficit of greater than 200, when does the opposing captain, in this case Kohli, need to make the decision? I think historically it's always been right before the start of the next day's play. I think that's a little bit contentious. Some people believe maybe South Africans should have been able to go to sleep knowing whether they're batting or bowling. So to me, Kohli having the advantage of mental gymnastics, where South Africa probably assumed they would come out to bowl, and then early morning on day 4 they found out they would bat. That's kind of the last bit. And then, finally, we talked a little about the composition earlier. When you were playing 5 out-and-out bowlers, the excuse that, they're tired, they probably need a little bit of a rest, is much less valid, right? If you think about it, in South Africa's first innings, Ishant bowled 10 overs, Umesh bowled 13, and Shami bowled 17. From a fast bowler standpoint, that is not too intense a workload. It doesn't surprise me that they should have been ready to come back and bowl. So, long answer to say I was personally surprised by it, as most of us were, but I don't think it was the wrong call.
Yeah, and I thought it was a brilliant call and very, very positive, and backing his bowlers as we said he does last week, right? And and it gave them eventually an extra day off, which they may have had some time off anyway on day 5, but I think just knowing that they're not going to come back on day 5, I think they just went for the win on day 4, and it only took them 67 overs to bowl South Africa out for a second time for 189. The wickets were shared amongst the bowlers. Yadav bowled particularly well, picking up 3. Sharma got 1, Shami got 1, Ashwin got 2, and Jadeja picked up 3. But Ashwin, for me, the highlight of the second innings was actually Saha's catching. I thought he was incredible in this test match. He took a fantastic catch to dismiss Theonis de Bruyn in the first innings as well, flinging himself to his right. He'd previously flung himself to his left to pick up a one-tip, one-hand catch of Bavuma, which was given not out on review. But his catch again of Theonis de Bruyn on the second innings, where this guy probably has just glanced it down leg side and thought it's gone for 4. And in the middle, he finds Riddhiman Saha yet again jumping across and picking it up. I thought that was fantastic. And then his juggling act that dismissed the South African captain, Faf du Plessis. The presence of mind that Saha has. Yes, and Kohli took a moment to mention him in the press conference as well, saying he was probably nervous coming back in Vizag, but he was back to his best. And what did you think of his keeping, Ashwin, in this test match? I thought he was back to his best, to be honest.
Yeah, spot on. And I mean, I think we talked about this when we talked about series selection or selection for the Vizag match, but the reason he was back in the 11 ahead of Rishabh Pant was his keeping, right? Arguably, it's not his batting. Pant has batted a little bit inconsistently maybe, but generally well in test matches. So they brought Saha in for his keeping because of the volume of overs of spin. And boy, has he lived up to that. I mean, that leg side catch was really something. We kind of take those for granted. That could have just as easily, kind of trickled down to the boundary for 4 without the keeper making an attempt. And we would have looked at it and said, of course, the keeper didn't attempt it. It was too far. But the presence of mind to start taking a couple steps down the leg side and then make the huge full length dive. He's also a short guy, so it needed to be a really big dive. But kudos. I thought that was great. I thought it was funny that after he took the juggling catch, which was also great reflexes, I think it was less than 2 overs later, Dean Elgar holds out to Umesh near the boundary, and Umesh did the same thing, juggled a couple. In Umesh's case, that was just poor fielding. He probably should have taken it cleanly, but hey, 2 juggled catches in 2 overs, not going to complain.
Yeah, and Saha's actually went off the batsman's thigh pad, and it really deviated, right? So I thought, Saha's value with the gloves has just been proved to me yet again in this series. The average is, I think, 30 odd with the bat. Pant average is about 44. Whether those 15 runs with the bat are worth a catch that might go down or buys in the field, that is the call that the Indian management's actually taken. So I thought it was absolutely incredible what Saha did. Obviously, there will always be pressure on him with people like Pant constantly improving, doing well at the domestic level. Sanju Samson, in fact, scored 212 this week to become a double centurion in the Vijay Hazare Trophy, which is the first double centurion in that game. So there are in that tournament. So there are people who are kind of breathing down Saha's neck, but really pleased for Saha to have done well. He was the first choice keeper before he got injured, and glad to see him back in the thick of things. Ashwin,
the only other quick highlight is on the catching is Rahane took a beautiful catch of Temba Bavuma as well at first slip. So there were a couple of drops. Kohli dropped 2 this match, etc. But when there are such beautiful catches, it offsets itself.
Oh yeah, and Rohit's catching as well. The 2 that he took in the second innings as well. One nearly took his face off the Rabada catch. Actually, it was just, really nice catching by Rohit as well. I thought a good addition to the slip cordon. Ashwin, do you have any other stats highlights for our listeners from this win? I know there was quite a lot of interesting stats that came out of it.
Yeah, a couple other things that are really interesting. We talked the 2 really big ones, right? The first being India's largest ever margin of victory against South Africa. That's a huge one. This is South Africa's a top quality side. Some may argue it's not their best 11 they've had in the last few years, but still largest ever victory, which was an innings at 137 runs. So really good feeling there. The second one obviously is the 11 home series in a row, which is the most ever and still going obviously until we manage to lose one. But Australia has done it twice before to get 10 consecutive home series in a row. So India has gone clear at the top with 11. The only other 2 that I was going to share, the first is about one of my favorites that you mentioned earlier, is Umesh Yadav. He's now picked up 16 test wickets in his last 2 matches alone. He picked up 6 in this match. But what was really interesting is he picked up 6 for 59 combined, so 3 wickets in each innings. But 6 for 59 is one of the best fast bowling spells at home ever. Only 3 times before this have fast bowlers been more efficient, meaning had a better average at home. So that's pretty interesting. Umesh, who didn't even get a slot in the first match, he came out today and said, he feels really good about his bowling, and that similar to what Ishant has said before, he needs to make the opportunities count because of the depth of fast bowling. He's not going to get a lot of shots. So really, really great to see him make his opportunity count. And then the last stat I wanted to share is also about quick bowling. This is from ESPN Cricinfo, but they shared that the difference in the average of fast bowlers from India versus fast bowlers from South Africa is 54 runs. So just to explain that a little further, India's quicks have given 21.75 runs per wicket they take. South Africa's quicks have given 75, almost 76 runs per wicket they take. That is a huge, huge, huge delta. The stats they crunch say South Africa's fast bowlers have never been outplayed by this big a margin in any series. So pretty incredible. That's pretty much all I had to say. Lots of great stats, lots of great records. Obviously, Kohli's 7,000 runs, Kohli's 7 doubles. We've talked a lot about those as well.
So I just want to pick 2 things up on that. One, Umesh, he did it without the man bun. Any comments on that?
I think Umesh man bun versus no man bun is a T20 specific thing. I think Umesh in tests has been pretty consistent across the board.
Okay, awesome. And the other thing, you mentioned the 11 consecutive home series wins, which is a record, right? Ashwin, before the test match started, there were some comments that Kohli made about the World Test Championship and how an away win should count double than a home win. So you should get double the points. And that he was putting that forward as a suggestion to incentivize teams to win away. Personally, I felt that was devaluing winning at home, particularly in India. And we've spoken about it on this show previously that we just take winning we take winning at home for granted. We don't value it as much perhaps other nations do. Australia lose test matches at home. England lose test matches at home. They may not lose series. We've lost one test match in recent memory against Australia at Pune. And we have literally swept everyone else. We have beaten everyone else extremely convincingly. We do it for fun. What did you make of Kohli's comments that these points should count for double if they come in an away win?
Yeah, not great. I sort of had the similar reaction that you did, which is he's undervaluing his own performances, his team's performances at home. And I think when you're so good at home, you take it for granted, but it's not always that easy, just like you said, to win at home. And by the way, if every country does it at home, then it should balance out, right? It's not that for some reason we have this crazy double standard where Asian teams winning at home is just like, they did it because of the pitches. And when England wins at home, because Jimmy Anderson gets a pitch tailor-made for him, we don't quite discredit him. We still give him plenty of credit. So from my perspective, I do completely agree with your reaction, which was you're undervaluing it a little. To be totally honest, I mean, Kohli's is being talked to by the media so much. I think somebody asked him a question about the point system and he said something a little bit off the cuff. I don't think it's something he thought through and analyzed and said out loud. So I don't want to overthink this. I hope we just continue to value our series wins and our match wins at home. And we should be given points as such because every country is going to play matches at home, except maybe Pakistan, I guess.
Well, they're back on the radar as well, but not a happy time for them at the moment, unfortunately. But
yeah, I mean, it's worth saying Sri Lanka has already come out and said they're going to think hard before touring again because I believe of the hassles caused by the intensity of the security detail. But anyway, that's a different discussion.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't know that actually. That's very interesting. But maybe we have an obsession with winning abroad because we haven't done that consistently for so many years, much like we had an obsession with producing fast bowlers. And now someone like Umesh, who tipped 6 for 59, is maybe our fifth choice bowler behind the top 4, I don't know. So I think it was, as you say, maybe it was just an off-the-cuff remark. Maybe he was just saying it because he's so keen to win test matches for India abroad. But hopefully we can get him in a quieter time and he can actually justify his position a little more. I think there is a value to using away wins to break ties at the top of the Test Championship, but I don't think they should merit any extra weightage. Anyway, moving on, Ashwin, there was some Twitter action recently, which I just wanted to talk to you about a little bit, which is Hardik Pandya is wishing Zahir Khan a very happy birthday by sending him a video of Hardik hitting Zahir for 6. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Hardik obviously has lots of free time on his hands post his back surgery in England. I don't know if he's still in England or not. He's posting all sorts of crazy stuff on Instagram, which I don't actually...
Is he in Japan? Because he was wearing a kimono type thing. I don't know.
I've made the choice to not follow him on social media, so all I know about Hardik's social media is when you or Varun screenshot something and send it to me. But yeah, definitely looked like he was wearing a kimono. I think Varun sent that one. I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to react to that. So, but funny, always nice to see players interacting on social media. I thought it was great that Zahir wasn't tech savvy enough to find the video, but his response to those birthday wishes was, well, let's focus more on the next ball I delivered to you because I think he got him out the next ball right after that 6. So that was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, that was pretty good. And the other thing I really enjoyed this week on social media was Lakshman's one-tip, one-hand catch, man. I mean, clearly the man has some talent.
That was outstanding. I mean, at short leg, if any of our listeners haven't watched it, we'll put it in the show notes and we've tweeted it out recently. But unbelievable, man. Like standing at short leg. How old is VVS Lakshman now? He's well into his 40s. And wearing a suit, probably mic'd up as well, made a full big dive to catch it one-tip, one-hand. It shows you just how valuable the one tip, one hand experience is for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we should try and make him our mascot or something. I thought he was just a fantastic catch. He looked like he was, he'd been doing it for years, man. But anyway, he was obviously one of the finest slip catches we ever had in India. And two last things I wanted to talk about very quickly. Another player from Lakshman's era, Dada, in breaking news about half an hour ago, is going to become the BCCI president. If sources are to be believed, there was some secret high-powered meeting apparently recently with Anurag Thakur and all of these guys who basically said Dada is going to become the president of the BCCI. What do you make of this stuff, man?
Yeah, I read the same. It looks like he's going to run and there's nobody else running. So running opposed, he'll automatically become it. I think what's really interesting is the BCCI president. So a question for you is, who's the current BCCI president?
I have zero idea anymore. Do we have one?
Yeah, it's somebody named C.K. Khanna, who the point being, I don't know how much value or how important the BCCI president role is. Obviously, there's been a lot of different people coming in after Dalmia passed in 2015. Shashank Manohar stepped down. Anurag Thakur was let go. So hopefully he can bring a little bit of stability. I think what's interesting for me is that that's not a position that in theory interferes with selection. So I don't exactly know what the BCCI president does, but hey, it'll be nice to see Dada around more. Hopefully this doesn't mean, due to conflict of interest rules, he has to stop mentoring the Delhi Capitals, but we'll have to find out how that goes.
Oh no, that'll be a shame, man. Like, this is going to directly affect the Delhi Capitals and this is not on. But you're right. I mean, the BCCI president, the last guy I remember is Jagmohan Dalmia. I think Sharad Pawar may have been, Shashank Manohar may have been in. But interesting that Dada is going to take over this position, because we spoke a few episodes ago about when he'd come out and said he wanted to maybe coach Team India in the future. And we'd said, I think Varun had said that he was probably better suited to navigating politics, right? And here we are, a few months later.
Yeah, Varun seems to know it all. He's predicted that spot on.
Yeah, except he couldn't predict the follow-on, which is why he's on the flight at the moment. And the other thing, that's the last point for this week's show, which is, whose prediction is going to come right, man, in the third test match? Which it's all still on. I said it was going to be 3-0. You said it was going to be 2-1. And Varun said it was going to be 2-0. So, Ashwin, are you still sticking to your 2-1 prediction, or are you going to turn coat now?
I think I have to stick to it, but it's looking really unlikely. Plus, by the way, this would be one I'm happy to lose. Like, I don't want to see the Indians step off the gas, try new players, etc. We should go all in, try to sweep it 3-0. So I hope you win this one. But yeah, you're right. We're all still alive, technically. Who knows? You could get 4 days of rain in Ranchi, which is unlikely in October, but you never know.
Absolutely. I hope we win as well. But what are your thoughts on it? Are we going to experiment at all with maybe Gill, Kuldeep, somebody in Ranchi, or are we going to stick to a tried and tested combination?
My gut tells me, I'm probably going to be wrong, but my gut tells me we will stick to a tried and tested combination and try to go in and win this series in a big way. I think you don't get opportunities to sweep South Africa often. India's also not playing too much test match cricket for the next year because of the lead up to the T20 World Cup. So I think they're going to go all in. Obviously, Ishant and Shami don't play limited overs at the moment. So, or I guess Ishant doesn't play limited. Ishant, Ashwin and Ashwin. Sorry, I'm getting all my math mixed up. But so I think they're going to want to keep playing those guys and let them have a final crack at winning 3-0.
Yeah, just speaking of Ashwin, and before we go, what did you make of Jadeja saying isko was bowling aati hai? When he missed the ball on his while fielding, he dived over the ball, and Jadeja was kind of mockingly saying isko was bowling hi aati hai. It's a bit unfair.
Yeah, I have a hard time understanding the relationship. Like, if they're just having fun and messing around, that's great. But I think Ashwin's a little too serious on the field. So if Jadeja was really taking a crack at him, given that Jadeja's now the first choice all format spinner, or all spinning all rounder, I think Jadeja's the senior player on the side, maybe, right? So who knows? Maybe that's what that was.
Well, no longer bits and pieces in any event. So, guys, that's this week's show. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure covering the Test series. India are leading 2-0, and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, do leave us a comment on Facebook. We're at One Tip One Hand, on Twitter at One Tip One Hand, on Instagram at One Tip One Hand as well. Send us an email with your feedback. It's contact@onetiponehand.com, or just get in touch and tell us what you think about the show. Tell your friends about the show. Tell your family about the show. We love hearing from you guys. So get in touch, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Do you wish you were smarter? Well, so do we. But the next best thing?
We could make you sound smarter.
And to help you with this endeavor, we are Simplified, a podcast that attempts to break down the complex world around you with a little knowledge, a lot of poor jokes, and a ton of random trivia.
Episodes out every Monday.
On the IVM podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
See ya!
रिश्ते में तो हम तुम्हारे पॉडकास्ट लगते हैं. नाम है फुटबॉल शुड बॉल.
Presenting Football Should Ball, a show about three friends discussing our favorite game over a beer. Sometimes 3, maybe even 5. Hi, I'm Shiva, and with me are my 2 sidekicks, Gaurav Sapre and Karthik Iyer.
Sidekick? You mean like Batman's Robin or Van Persie Robin?
No, I mean like Alexis Sanchez, but with a little more skill than just playing the piano.
Ha! Just shows how the best players at Arsenal are mere bench warmers at United.
Oh, thank you, Iyer. But you're a Fulham supporter, so whenever you say anything to support me, I question my beliefs.
Just like how Griezmann would say, एक बार मैंने जो decision ले लिया, तो मैं अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनता.
Banter aside, we will talk match reports, transfer rumors, top controversies, fantasy football picks, and so much more. So grab a beer and tune in to Football Should Ball every Wednesday on the IVM podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.